day 1001 of the Trump administration. It was a bad day for the Trump administration. And in plain English, here's why. The president's chief of staff speaking out loud in front of the press corps in the White House briefing room reversed everything the president has been saying about the call with Ukraine. He said military aid was held up over politics, said they do it all the time, said we should get over it. He confirmed Rudy Giuliani has been all over U.S. foreign policy. He said the president's own golf resort has been selected as the host location for the next G7, while at the same time the vice president was overseas, in essence giving Turkey what they want and cementing the end of the Kurdish homeland. But let's start at the beginning. Here is Mick Mulvaney, who enjoys the title Acting Chief of Staff, confirming what we've seen happen. The president holding back aid to pressure Ukraine into investigating the Democrats.
Did he also mention to me in the past the corruption related to the DNC server? Absolutely. No question about that. But that's it. And that's why we held up the money. Now, there was a report.
So the demand for an investigation into the Democrats was part of the reason that he ordered to withhold funding to Ukraine.
The look back to what happened in 2016 certainly was part of the thing that he was worried about in corruption with that nation. And that is absolutely appropriate.
Withholding the funding.
Yeah. And I have news for everybody. Get over it.
Clearly, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happens as well.
We do that all the time with foreign policy.
Mulvaney's remarks undercut what his boss has been saying all along.
There was no quid pro quo at all.
There is no pro quo.
There was no quid pro quo.
There was no quid pro quo, unlike Biden. There was no quid pro quo. There was nothing.
Now, keep in mind, Mulvaney also runs the Office of Management and Budget and had a hand in blocking the aid to Ukraine.
Was involved with the process by which the money was held up temporarily. Okay, 3 issues for that: the corruption in the country, whether or not other countries were participating in the support of the Ukraine, and whether or not they were cooperating in an ongoing investigation with our Department of Justice. That's completely legitimate.
Not long after that briefing, a senior Justice Department official told NBC News, quote, if the White House was withholding aid from Ukraine with regard to any investigation by the Justice Department, that's news to us. Trump's counsel also distanced himself from Mulvaney, saying, quote, the president's legal counsel was not involved in acting chief of staff Mick Mulvaney's press briefing. NBC News reports one Trump ally called Mulvaney's news conference, quote, an unmitigated disaster. This evening, Mulvaney pivoted away from his comments, issuing a statement saying in part, quote, let me be clear, there was absolutely no quid pro quo between Ukrainian military aid and any investigation into the 2016 election. The president never told me to withhold any money until the Ukrainians did anything related to the server. There was never any condition on the flow of the aid related to the matter of the DNC server. All of that would be fine. What he just said there, had he not said all of that aloud in front of the press corps today. Trump told reporters he didn't see Mulvaney's briefing, but the Wall Street Journal reports Trump, quote, agreed on the need for Mr. Mulvaney to walk back his comments and personally approved his chief's statement and blamed the media's handling of the press briefing, not Mr. Mulvaney. Trump did give Mulvaney his endorsement.
Mick is a good man. I have a lot of confidence.
That was it. On Capitol Hill, impeachment investigators spent over 9 hours interviewing Gordon Sondland, Trump's ambassador to the EU, who was also tapped to help deal with Ukraine. Sondland's opening statement indicated Giuliani had a direct role in carrying out Trump's policy on Ukraine, a decision he said he disagreed with, but carried out nonetheless. However, some House members told NBC News that while Sondland did have some gaps in his recall, he did corroborate much of the whistleblower's complaint. Today, we also learned Trump will host the 2020 G7 Summit of World Leaders at his Doral Golf Resort near Miami. We'll have more on this just ahead. And amid all of this, the administration is now congratulating itself for a 5-day ceasefire they say they've negotiated with Turkey in its attack on the Kurds in Syria. An exceptionally stern-faced Mike Pence negotiated the agreement with Turkish President Erdogan, in which the White House conveniently agreed to hold off on imposing new sanctions. The Kurds were not part of those negotiations. The deal essentially gives Turkey what it wants, control over that land. As our own Richard Engel put it tonight, Trump just gave away the Kurdish homeland to the Kurds' sworn enemy. This afternoon, Senator Mitt Romney, who opposed Trump's decision to pull U.S. troops out of Syria, had clearly had enough. He went to the Senate floor and suggested the administration may have been bullied into this deal.
It's been suggested that Turkey may have called America's bluff, telling the president they were coming no matter what we did. If that's so, we should know it, for it would tell us a great deal about how we should deal with Turkey now and in the future. Was there no chance for diplomacy? Are we so weak and so inept diplomatically that Turkey forced the hand of the United States of America? Turkey?
Here for our leadoff discussion on this consequential Thursday night, Anita Kumar, White House correspondent and associate editor over at Politico, Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff at the CIA and the Pentagon, former chief counsel to House Intel, and Greg Miller, national security correspondent for the Washington Post, also happens to be the author of The Apprentice, Trump, Russia, and the Subversion of American Democracy. Greg, I'd like to begin with you. What did Mick Mulvaney just admit to today?
Between his two statements, at the outset, he basically admitted from the White House podium what the White House has been insisting was not the case for weeks now, that there was a quid pro quo, that the United States government was withholding $400 million in aid from a country that desperately needs help in fending off aggression from Russia on the condition that Ukraine have to investigate what amount to conspiracy theories at this point relating to the election interference of 2016. It was an astonishing thing to watch.
Anita Kumar, why do you think a guy like Mulvaney would walk into that briefing room and, in effect, light himself on fire on live television?
Well, obviously, he was sent out there with a specific message. The message was about the G7 being at Trump-Doral next year. But he knew he would get questions about Ukraine, and he was briefed and ready for those questions. And he was supposed to stick to that message, the message we've been hearing for weeks. But he had a lot of questions and a lot of, relentless questioning and eventually said this. And, of course, we saw him quickly backtrack on that. And, I think that initially I had heard that from a lot of people that Trump was initially pleased with how he had done. He liked his attitude. He was sparring with reporters, talking back, saying it doesn't matter, who cares, get over it, as the line you used. But then when he saw the publicity that this was getting and realized what had happened, obviously he was the one who said he needs to go back there and fix this and clean this up. But as you said, the damage is done, and you'll bet members of Congress are going to be using that statement in the coming weeks.
Jeremy Bash, because of what we saw transpire today, because of what we heard with our own ears, did impeachment just take a giant step forward?
I think it did, Brian. Essentially, what Mick Mulvaney said today was, we did it. Get over it. So, in essence, by admitting the quid pro quo, by admitting this, I think we see now the outline of four main articles of impeachment that the House will likely consider. First, soliciting foreign interference in the U.S. election. Second, undermining American national security by withholding military aid to pressure foreign interference in a United States election. Third, lying to the public about it, based on the clips that you showed of President Trump denying the quid pro quo. And fourth, obstructing a congressional investigation. And I think those four issues are going to be the main issues in some way, shape, or form as this heads to the House within a matter of weeks.
And, Jeremy, I've got to ask you, did it just get easier for Republicans to consider impeachment? And did Mitt Romney give some folks some air support today with his comments?
Well, that's hard to know, Brian. It's a little hard to know the way this is going to all shake out on Capitol Hill. But I do think that Senator Romney's quite principled statements today particularly his statements about the Syria situation, I think is going to give voice to others on a bipartisan basis to really say to the president, Mr. President, you're undermining American national security. You've done it in the context of this Syria discussion. We are gravely concerned about how you handled the Ukraine matter, and there is cause and a reason to believe that this abuse of office, if left unchecked, will continue.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.